So what I wanted to do here is have a discussion about the Future Imperfect tie-in from Secret Wars. And what I'm hoping is that at the end of all of this, you'll have a strong understanding of who the Maestro is, as well as how he relates to the Incredible Hulk. And so the Maestro was created by Peter David in 1992 as an answer to the relationship between Bruce Banner and his father Brian Banner. What I mean here is that while the Incredible Hulk premiered in 1962, the narrative had simply shown that he was exposed to gamma radiation during an experiment which resulted in the formation of the Hulk. And while there had occasionally been mention of his parents, it wasn't until 1985 with issue number 312 under Bill Mantlo that Marvel began to provide an explanation on the history of Bruce Banner with the introduction of his alcoholic and abusive father Brian Banner, and by extension, explain why the Hulk came into existence when the gamma radiation incident occurred. Now I'd like you to take particular notice of what we talk about here, because when we transition to Future Imperfect and the Maestro himself, what we'll find is that this depiction of Brian Banner is almost identical to the portrayal of the Maestro. As we're shown, Brian Banner was a physicist who had worked in the field of atomic radiation, and because of his exposure to various forms of energy, his concern was that these atomic energies had bonded themselves to his molecular structure. As a result, he'd never had any intention of producing children, but when his wife became pregnant unexpectedly, the concern of Brian Banner was that he had produced a monster. While this seems to be more due to paranoia than anything else, the fact remained that following the birth of Bruce Banner, because his mother Rebecca doted over him and because her attention had been deviated from her husband Brian, this combined with Brian's belief that Bruce harbored modifications to his genetic structure led him to hate his son. As a result, Brian Banner kept Rebecca away from their son as often as he could and instead left Bruce in the care of a nurse named Miss Meacham who would abuse him both physically and emotionally. Furthermore, Brian's hatred of his son intensified when Bruce was given a building set by his mother. Demonstrating enhanced intelligence by assembling the pieces extremely fast, Bruce's father considered his son to be a mental freak due to the fact that he was able to assemble the set so quickly. Lashing out at Bruce, Rebecca attempted to come to her son's aid but was physically accosted by her husband. And so while Bruce did what he could to help, his father smacked him back, referring to him as a monster. Now while Brian Banner would rarely continue to be depicted during the remainder of Bill Mantlo's run, because this retcon among others was received extremely poorly by fans, the title began to slump in sales, leading to Bill Mantlo's replacement with Peter David in 1997 with issue number 331. Because the publications were selling so poorly, Peter David was given virtual free reign over the stories, and during his 12-year run, which has become something of legend, he took the concept of Brian Banner and used it as a way to introduce the Maestro. Bridging the gap between the two by way of introducing a being named Delphi who could see the future, Peter David introduced the organization called the Pantheon, which operated for centuries from the shadows and served as a way for Hulk to receive information which would allow him to perform rescue and relief missions in order to make up for his previous rampages throughout the world. Because Delphi was established as being able to predict the future with uncanny accuracy, while it's only in passing and initially left extremely ambiguous, Peter David introduced the Maestro as one of Delphi's predictions in stating that at some point in the future, the Hulk would become the very essence of evil and dispassion itself. And so following up with this narrative of the Maestro, rather than continuing the version of the Incredible Hulk that we had seen, who had taken the opposite of his father's abusive methods, Peter David introduced a two-part story called Future Imperfect as a way to depict a version of the Hulk which saw him embracing the abusive nature of his father. So the story of Future Imperfect as it's written for Secret Wars actually borrows a few concepts from the original and retcons everything else. And so what we're going to do here is go through the events as they transpire and fill in the holes regarding what Peter David took from the original story in order to bring us this full understanding of the tie-in. And so the story initially picks up following a woman named Ruby as she travels into the desert surrounding Dystopia. What Peter David does here is draw on a couple of previously established elements in order to bring us this introduction. In the original Future Imperfect event, Dystopia was a megacity formed under the Maestro as the last refuge on Earth following the collapse of civilization after a nuclear war. And for the Maestro himself, at his base strength, he was much stronger than the Incredible Hulk due to having been exposed to the atomic radiation that came with the nuclear fallout. And so what Peter David also does is incorporate the character of Ruby. And while we're not told why she's here, because there are no other versions of Ruby who exist within the Secret Wars tie-ins, we're largely left to assume that this is the same Ruby who is the daughter of Cyclops and Emma Frost and hailed from the timeline of Lucas Bishop, something that we had gone over in my video about his character. However, as she makes her way through the desert, she eventually comes across an old man. Because dystopia is quite literally a survival of the fittest world, the mindset of Ruby is that if the old man is alive, she can help him, but if he's dead, she'll strip him of whatever he has and leave his corpse. After arriving though, she finds that the old man is alive, but also learns that he claims to be Odin of Asgard and the father of Thor and Loki. With the heroes of this reality having died off long before Ruby came into existence, her knowledge of Asgard is largely limited to myth and legend. But because she knows enough about the stories to know that Odin is incredibly powerful and wise, she offers to bring the man back to their base of operations, which, as she reveals, serves to undermine the authority of the Maestro and remove him from power. Now, after arriving in the city, the group is met by a woman named Janice. In the original Future Imperfect event, Janice wasn't really the leader of the rebellion so much as she was the field commander. The real leader of the rebellion was actually Rick Jones, the grandfather of Janice, and the reason why Bruce Banner became the Hulk. To sidetrack for a second, during the Gamma Bomb experiment that transformed Banner, when the Gamma Bomb was set to detonate, a life sign was detected within the blast radius. Running out to remove the person before they were killed, the individual was revealed to have been Rick Jones, who was rescued by Banner, which led to his exposure to the gamma radiation and his transformation into the Hulk. And so getting back into our story, while Janice is a little hesitant to allow someone into their ranks, Peter David leads us to believe that Ruby has demonstrated her trustworthiness over the course of her time with the rebellion. While he doesn't really say how, the result is that once they arrive within the confines of the base, Janice has a telepath scan the mind of Odin to ensure that he doesn't pose a threat to the group, after which he'll be taken before the leader of the rebellion. However, once the telepath reads his mind, her reaction is one of pain and anguish as she explains that Odin intends to harm the group by killing them all. At this point, we learn that this man is not Odin, and instead is actually the Maestro who has taken on his form of Bruce Banner. Attacking the group and sending everyone running for their lives, the Maestro relishes in the fact that he had been hunting for the rebel base for quite some time. Not only that, the Maestro had used his disguise of Odin to make contact with Ruby after monitoring her and realized that she was making several trips into the desert. What I'd also like you to notice is that as he's depicted here, the Maestro is vastly different from the Hulk that we're used to. Whenever the Hulk went on rampages, more often than not, he was savage and would seemingly tear things apart without any true thought other than destruction. The Maestro is cunning and obscene, but also possesses the intelligence of Bruce Banner without the moral limitations. And so with the various rebels on the brink of death and defeat at the hands of the Maestro, the conflict is met with the arrival of the leader of the rebel group, the Thing. Now from here, we learn that this version of the Thing is not actually Ben Grimm. In addition to this, Peter David continues differentiating the version of Future Imperfect from the original. In the original event, the Incredible Hulk had been pulled from the past in order to fight the Maestro and end his reign. In this story, the Thing is actually General Thunderbolt Ross. Rather than Susan Storm, Johnny Storm, Reed Richards, and Ben Grimm gaining their powers by way of cosmic radiation, prior to the global nuclear war, General Thunderbolt Ross and his commanding officer General Talbot had been performing a routine mission in space. When the two were bombarded with radiation, Ross wasn't able to keep the vessel under control, and after crashing to Earth, General Talbot had been killed and Ross was transformed into the Thing. Now transitioning back to the story, the battle between Ross and Maestro stretches across the lengths of dystopia. What I'd also like you to notice here is that Ross is vastly different from Ben Grimm. Where Grimm has more of a caring nature, especially when it comes to innocent civilians, Ross is less concerned about civilians. During the conflict, he even goes so far as to state that he doesn't care whether innocent people die as long as he defeats the Maestro. While this isn't extremely important for the story, what it does do is establish the varying differences between popular characters as they exist during the Secret Wars event. And so with the battle between the two being short-lived due to the overwhelming strength of the Maestro, Ross is taken back to the castle of the Maestro in an effort to send the rebels into chaos without a powerful leader. Now again, something I'd like to draw your attention to here is Layla Miller. When Ross was captured, Ruby along with a couple others make plans to attempt to enter the Maestro's castle. But along the way, they encounter the Maestro's hounds, which basically operate as his advanced guard. However, amidst some of the forces are Layla Miller, who reveals that she along with a handful of others are working to defeat the Maestro independently of the rebels within dystopia. Now the importance of Layla Miller is that she made her debut in Marvel Comics with the House of M as a mutant who was able to know the outcome of any and all events that take place. Where Marvel largely leaves this ambiguous and keeps it as a plot device for stories, In future Imperfect, Layla doesn't seem to have any abilities whatsoever and instead seems to have prodigious combat skills. While it may be that her powers are developed by her character in future stories, as things transition, we pick up with Ruby and the rest of the group as they're led further into the Maestro's castle, where it's revealed that he alongside Ross are working together temporarily. As is explained to us, the goal of the Maestro is to defeat Doom and usurp his position as ruler of Battleworld, while Ross simply wants to see Doom removed from dystopia. And so in order to achieve their respective goals, the Maestro has to locate and secure the fabled Destroyer of Asgard, which would grant him the necessary power to destroy Doom. Now, because the Destroyer armor is in a hidden location, the only way for the group to locate it is to violate the laws of Battleworld by traveling to other territories and questioning the locals. Arriving in a place called Norseheim, which seems to serve as a stand-in for Asgard and the 10 Realms, the group arrives at a local bar. After trashing the place and questioning the various occupants, Maestro is eventually provided the information he seeks by a man named Hoder. While this is left largely ambiguous here, what Hoder does is provide Maestro with the location of the Destroyer armor, but also states that he is responsible for the destruction of Asgard. Again, while this is left ambiguous, the importance of Hoder's statement comes in the fact that he, like others that we'll find in the various tie-ins for Secret Wars, is aware of how things used to be before the collapse of the multiverse. Now, once the group arrives at the location of the Destroyer armor, they effectively have to get past 2 levels of security. The first is passing Ulik the Troll, and the second is getting past the Ancient One. Regarding Ulik, he's actually one of the rock trolls that existed within Asgard. While almost nothing is known about his heritage or how he came to be, Ulik is actually several thousand years old and is the strongest member of his race. As such, his role is to kill all those who attempt to enter the domain of the Destroyer armor in order to ensure its protection against those who would use it for nefarious purposes. Something I'd also like you to take notice is that Peter David provides us with a measure of Maestro's strength in relation to other individuals. During their battle, we're told that Ulik possesses the strength of Thor, but the Maestro was easily able to overpower him, which establishes that the Maestro is well beyond any of the Thors and could quite possibly pose a threat to Doom if the fabled power of the Destroyer armor is true. And so with Ulik thwarted and pushed to the brink of death, he allows the Maestro, Ross, and the rest of the group to pass and continue forward to the Ancient One. However, once they arrive, we learn that the Ancient One is not the same being that trained Doctor Strange and instead is actually just Rick Jones. And taking the name of the Ancient One because it sounded cooler, rather than putting up a fight, Rick Jones simply allows the Maestro to pass. However, this comes with a warning of sorts, in that Rick Jones states that the Destroyer armor is tied to the wishing wells of Battleworld, and that they grant wishes to those who access them, but Doom had been notified of what Maestro was attempting to do. And so with Doom only minutes away, Maestro seizes the opportunity to access the Destroyer armor before Doom shows up. In addition to this, Rick Jones provides one last warning in stating that if the Maestro follows through with his plan, there will be no turning back, indicating that his encounter with Doom will result in his own destruction. However, Maestro chooses to ignore Rick Jones, and shortly after accessing the Destroyer armor is met with the arrival of Doom God. Now brimming with both power and arrogance, Maestro confronts Doom and actually begins to gain the upper hand. With Doom throwing out everything he has, his efforts appear to be in vain as Maestro's vast resistance and strength combined with the Destroyer armor allow him to withstand all of Doom's attacks. Eventually gaining the upper hand and destroying Doom, we learn that all of this was actually an illusion. As Rick Jones explains, the Destroyer armor as it was enchanted by Doom grants the wishes in the mind of its wielder, and because Maestro wished to defeat Doom, the Destroyer armor provided him with this illusion. And so as the story begins to come to a close and Maestro reverts back to his human form of Bruce Banner, Rick Jones reveals that the illusion is apparently irreversible, and Maestro will spend the rest of his days trapped in his own mind under the belief that he has successfully destroyed Doom and taken over as ruler of Battleworld. With that being said, we're going to bring this video to an end. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And let me know what other tie-ins you guys are interested in seeing for Secret Wars. And I will catch you guys later. Peace.